Canada. I like
All right, if we're ready,
Pie. I'd rather go pie any day long.
are we ready to go?
Yes.
Good evening. Got to call to order the Budget Review Committee. A meeting of the Budget Review Committee was held Monday, September 26, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the Automatic Chamber. Acting Chair will be Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien. I will preside over today's hearings and fit in for clerk, give you guys a break. All right. Without objections, going to call roll call. Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman Ernest Jetty.
Here.
Alderman June M. Karen.
Here.
And Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien is present. Sick this evening is our Chairman Richard A. Dowd. Okay, other members in attendance we have with us this evening is the Mayor James Donches and John Griffin, CFO and Treasurer and Tax Collector for the City of Nashua. I will now open up for public comment. If anybody has any comment on what's on the agenda, please state your name and address, please.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I just wanted to address the use of the surplus money for the fund balance to reduce the tax rate. I wanted to know if somebody tonight could go over what that savings means. I'm trying to look at it as a citizen, so my thinking was $1 million constitutes about 1/3% of the appropriations budget, because the appropriations budget was, I think, was $303 million. So $1 million is 1/3%. And if I apply that 1/3% to the tax rate, I can't apply it to the 2320. I think I have to look at it at the reduced rate, which I'm thinking would come in around $18. That would amount to 6 cents per million. So I'm trying to see, is it correct 4 million would drop the tax rate about 24 cents? Or what would that number be? And can someone help me with the math, just to understand what the change is per $1 million? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing nobody else in the room. We'll go to communications. There are none. Unfinished business, there is none. And new business resolutions. Before us this evening is R-22-062, establishing the use of fund balance for the tax rate. Alderman Wilshire, do you make a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to recommend final passage of Resolution 2262.
Okay, we have a motion for final passage of R-22-062. At this time, does the mayor want to speak first, or do you want CFO Griffin to introduce it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So tonight we are here to talk about applying the proposal that we apply $4.4 million of the surplus or reserve to the tax rate. And you have on your desk a couple of slides which we wanted to focus on. First, one of our objectives, of course, we want to apply money to the tax rate to, as we have in the past, to give as much tax relief as possible. But secondly, one area that we want to focus on is to ensure that the bond rating, which is now AAA with 2 agencies, with Standard & Poor and Fitch, that we maintain that AAA bond rating. That is important because, of course, it confirms that the city is well-run and stable, financially stable, but also because the bond rating helps to determine the interest rate that the city pays on any debt that it incurs. And this has always been important, but is especially important now as we see interest rates rising for the city, for anyone borrowing money, and across the board in the economy. Now, we focused on, and you see on the first slide on the top here, These are comments made by Standard & Poor, which was reaffirmed the AAA bond rating recently. Although they say we have a stable outlook, they give a downside scenario, which is, quote, should the city's financial performance deteriorate and lead to fund balance drawdowns with no plans to restore, we could lower the rating. And also, a second comment having to do with consistent financial performance. The quote is, quote, Nashua has historically maintained very strong reserves. So in addition to making sure that we do as much as we possibly can for the tax rate with the $4 million application for tax reduction, we also want to make sure that we continue to have a healthy fund balance and maintain the bond rating. Now, what the rating agencies are looking for is for a consistent growth in the fund balance. The ordinances also require that at least 10% of the city budget be held in reserve in a fund balance. Now, as you see from the slide, over the last 11 years, the fund balance has been climbing steadily pretty much every year. And that's what we want to continue. This year, we did draw down on the fund balance in two respects. Number one, we applied $1.4 million of the fund balance to fund year one of the teacher's contract before the health savings kick in year two. And secondly, we applied money, 600,000, 700,000?
About 600.
600,000 to the fire department because COVID-related expenses caused them to overspend the budget. So simply to maintain the the balance, we need to, replace that 2.1 million, and we're proposing that we continue to grow the fund balance from 40.3 million to 42.6, which will show, continue to show strong reserves and a strong financial performance. The two lines you see, the two bar graphs, are the 42 million is the total fund balance. 34 is the undesignated fund balance. The gap, the delta, so to speak, between the 42 and the 34 is the so-called designated fund balance. That is designated for future liabilities. Those could be things like we saw this year, a need to fund the teacher's contract or the problem with the fire department budget. But when you combine the two totals, you see that the fund balance is growing, and that's what we want to continue to show, consistent financial performance over a period of years and even really decades. So along with the application of $4 million to the tax rate, this would be the result. We would grow the fund balance to the numbers you see. I think Alderman Sullivan had asked about, and I know some people have not been through this before, but so we're trying to give you some of the information. I think Alderman Sullivan had asked about the designated and the undesignated fund balance, and I think that at least provides you a basic explanation. Also, you've asked about the tax rate. Now, we don't know, in an absolute certainty what it's going to be, but based upon kind of the preliminary denominator, which is the amount of the tax base, we believe the tax rate will be below 1850, and a rough estimate would be 1830 plus or minus. But that will be worked out for sure within a short time. Ultimately, the DRA, Department of Revenue Administration from the state of New Hampshire, sets the tax rate, but certainly, given the information we have now, we can estimate what it may be. So in summary, and CFO Griffin can fill in on anything where I made any errors in any of the statements or any further information, he can help answer questions and the like. But that gives you the overview as to why we think we need to make sure that the fund balance continues to grow and how we would go about applying $4 million to the tax rate. The question was asked about how much $1 million equates to. Although the overall budget is about $300 million or a little bit more, really the important figure is how much are we collecting in local taxes. So the answer is, since it's around 250 million, about 2.5 million equates to a 1% on the tax rate. $1 million would equate approximately to 0.4%.
Okay, you all set, Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
Yeah.
I just,
All right, at
do you
this
have anything
time,
to add?
does, Mr. Griffin, do you have something you would like to add?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mayor. As you may recall, on September 30, there was a communication from the mayor called notification of surplus and overlay. And as part of that exhibit, what we decided was to make sure that we're better than the 10%, and historically we've been over 11%. So as the mayor indicated, with the increase in the unassigned fund balance, we're at 11.2%. So that 34 million is 11.2% of the $303 million budget. In addition to that, we plan to put in the tax calculation, recommend to the DRA a $6 million amount for overlay, which is a bit larger than we normally do, but because of some of the outstanding abatement filings, we think it's prudent to put $6 million into that overlay reserve. And we have a balance of about $583,000, so we feel confident that that's going to help us this year with the abatement proceedings. The other thing that's in the assigned fund balance, just wanted to make sure everyone knew, is we put in the 1.5 million overlay reserve that had been with us for a couple of decades. We had to use that this year to get us through the abatements that took place last fiscal year. So we'll have the 6.583 million coupled with the 1.5, so we're in good shape in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we'll open up for questions. We'll start at this side of the room. Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few. Thank you for the help on the tax rate. That is, I know that I sent out rapid fire emails yesterday, but my constituents are concerned and I wanted to see if we could get there, and I appreciate the information tonight. I do need help understanding a little bit that second slide that you have. You have 42.6 million in the total fund balance. Explain to me the difference between the unassigned fund balance and the total fund balance one more time, please.
Sure. The unassigned fund balance is truly that. It's unassigned to anything. It's a show of strength that's recognized in your ordinance, the Board of Aldermen's ordinance, of having a 10% threshold of the current year budget. But more importantly, over the last several years, since I've been here, since 2010, we've done better than that. We've had 11.2, 11.4. This year, we're projected 11.2. Now, that's unassigned. There's no specific purpose. And how that could be used by the Board of Aldermen is to appropriate the money if we needed to. But in conversations I've had with the rating agencies, it's a show of strength in financial reserves. That's a show of strength. The other thing that happens, and we've been able to grow, as you can see, the dark blue bar is greater, it's increased over the green bar in this regard. We recognize that another show of strength is to have assigned fund balance. That's an opportunity for the CFO of the city to take any surplus that he or she doesn't want to apply to the unassigned and assign it, kind of flagging the fact that we know of certain liabilities that need to be covered in the future. Back a few years ago, it was the pension situation with the NHRS. We thought it prudent to assign fund balance, to grow that assigned fund balance in that regard. Shortly after the pension, we had medical increases, medical insurance increases that's been talked about at length. And as the mayor indicated, this past year, we used some of the money for the fire department shortfall and some of the money for the first year of the contract for the teachers before the health savings kick in next year. So that's a recognition by the financial community that reviews our books that we have some stable reserves, and that's why we thought it was important to note that kind of once you get the reserves, you want to grow them and keep them and maintain them. So they knew that the rating agency in particular, Standard & Poor's, knew we from time to time have to draw down on those reserves, but if we do have a plan to restore them, that's high marks. Now, what they do is they always have, there's a downside scenario that the mayor mentioned. If we don't have a plan to put the money back, they'd be concerned. But the second statement they make, the consistent financial performance, they're comfortable that we've been able to do what we've indicated. And the last piece is the watching of the budgets on a continuous basis by the financial departments and the operating divisions. That puts us in good stead. So it's a long answer to hopefully a short question, but very important to keep our reserves as consistent as possible with growth. That's what they look for. Thank you.
Follow-up?
Thank you. You had mentioned pensions. There was discussion during the budget hearings about how much, I know that in years past, the state has not kicked in any money towards our pension. There was reference to we would be getting some money. It was a little blurry, murky at that point. Has that picture cleared up at all as far as what we would be getting from the state to help us offset the pensions?
It's a little bit clearer. As I communicated, I believe a few months ago, the state plans on getting bona fide information from the NHRS. NHRS will submit that data to the state treasurer's office, to the budget office, so they can calculate what our reimbursement will be for that 15% of fiscal '22 expenses for police, fire, and teachers.
Okay.
Let's say that number is approximately $2 million. The objective is in the next month for the DRA, who reviews and sets the city's tax rate, to have that number and put it in the schedule. That's where we're at with that. We don't know what the number is yet, but hopefully it's close to what we had projected last year.
Okay.
But in terms of additional context, keep in mind that this year, or excuse me, the year in which we're talking about, which is fiscal '22, the state raised the city's budget for pensions by $4 million. Actually, 4.4 or about, unrelated to the any increase in wages. So the real increase is 5.1 or something, but a small amount of that is due to increases in wages. So they raised it $4 million. Our friend Mike O'Brien pulled several rabbits out of the hat and through the House got bills passed to help pay municipal pension costs. And in order to, I guess, compromise with the Alderman O'Brien approach, which was to permanently restore part of the money, the Senate agreed to a one-time payment. Now, further context, which I probably should have said at the beginning, the way the state got into this, the way the city and all the other municipalities got into the state pension system, the inducement was, if you join the state pension system, we will always pay 35% of municipal pension costs for all cities and towns. Some years ago, that was reduced and then ultimately wiped out to going down to zero. And so cities and towns, and when I talk to mayors, it's like everyone is, very upset that this promise, this commitment, this legal commitment really, because it was in law, was broken. And we've been fighting with Alderman O'Brien leading the charge to try to restore some of that 35%. And I think the figure this time was 15% for 1 year.
Well, the first bill was 7.5.
7.5% for
Right.
1 year. But if you accumulate, if you total the amount that broken promise has cost the taxpayers of Nashua, the number is $74 million cash. And in addition to that, the system was mismanaged, so even the total bill, putting aside the 35%, is mushroomed. And so now the city is paying, 34 million into to the pension system. And it's nice that they are helping out a little bit, but it doesn't even come close to what the original commitment was, that was kept for decades, but then was broken.
Oh, but Alderman Sullivan, I'll recognize you 1 second. But for everybody's peace of mind, I didn't get it. I was about inches off the goal line. Didn't cross the goal line, but I wrote it again. So wish us luck. So that bill will be going forward. Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. Final question that I have is around our trust fund. I noticed that we have a pension trust fund with a balance of about $950,000 in it. Any chance that we might be able to allocate some of those dollars for the upcoming or the fiscal year that we're currently in to help offset that tax rate a little bit more?
So, just to give a little background, when we were facing double-digit increases several boards ago, we decided to create a new NHRS pension trust fund that you mentioned. We put $900,000 in and haven't used it. It can be used, but we haven't used it yet. We originally tried to put in a lot more, but it was $900. It was about half of what we needed at the time. How that would work is we would probably take that as a revenue source. So the mechanics would be, the Board of Aldermen would recognize it as a revenue to offset the tax rate. But at this point, we haven't used it yet.
I think part of it is that, we did get the 2 million this year, and which meant the increase was only 2 million for this 1 year. But next year, there's no promise that 2 million is coming back. So next year, in effect, it will go up. It'll go up another. Go up the 2 million that went up this year plus another 2. So maybe when that hits fully, could be the best time to use it.
Okay. That's it.
Good.
Yes,
Thank you. Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So as I understand your explanation of the assigned and unassigned fund balance, the assigned fund balance are, so first of all of this money is surplus money. And we collected this money more than what we spent in the last fiscal year. And so the assigned part of it is what you estimate we might have to use. They're kind of potentials that you're aware of, as opposed to the unassigned fund balance is you're not aware of anything, but it's there to protect us in case something comes up. We have reserves so that we can, we can pay whatever might come up, but things that we're not anticipating, but that could come up. Is that a layman's
That's
explanation
that
of?
is a good explanation, Alderman Jettie. The unassigned is recognized in the ordinance where it requires 10%. And I believe just before I got here in 2010, I think it was 8, and you folks increased it to 10. That's a sign, that's widely recognized, and that's why when the auditor came in, he pointed out the unassigned fund balance. We like to see growth in the unassigned. And at the end of the year, at the end of the book closing, we say, the comptroller, myself, with guidance from the mayor, we say, how much assigned, how much do we have left? You have two choices. One is you throw it all into the unassigned, which we don't want to do because we want to grow that consistently. So we have an assigned. And we use the word assigned because liabilities, we know they're there. They can hit us at any time. Or not hit us, we might need to use the reserves. So that, the layman's term is, the unassigned is your piggy bank. The assigned is money you have in another location that you can use for some future, what they call future liabilities.
But I think a significant point is what the rating agencies, the financial community is looking for is the total of those two numbers to grow overall. So that's what what you see on the chart here. Things do come up that could require the use of the assigned balance. I mean, this year we used it for at least those two purposes. The teacher's contract and the fire. Next year they could raise the pension bill $4 million. Again, we don't know for sure. And so, but again, it's the total number that the rating agencies, the financial community is the most interested in. And as you see, that's growing steadily over the last, well, we've shown 11 years here on the chart. That's grown steadily for the last 11 years.
Okay.
Follow up?
And the 10%, is that 10% of the total budget or 10% of the tax collections?
That would be 10% of the approved budget. So it'll be 10% of the 303 million.
Okay.
And in this particular analysis, it's 11.2%. So that's a, we beat that amount of 10%.
Okay, thank you. And another, and I know the mayor was trying to answer the question about, what effect this 4 million will have on the tax rate, but I kind of lost it when you. So if you could help me, so the 4 million, so right now you're estimating the tax rate to be $18.30 per thousand.
Plus or minus, yes.
Right, I know it's an estimate and plus or minus. If we didn't transfer this 4 million towards the tax rate, what would that estimate be in dollars? Not percentages, but in dollars. Instead of 1830, what do you think it would be?
It'd be about close to 1860.
1850?
60.
1860.
I'm just mentally saying it would add about 27 cents, 28, something like that.
Okay.
The way I get there is that, remember, 2.5 million equals 1% of the tax rate. And the way you get to that is that we collect $250 million in property taxes. The rest of the revenue is other sources, but a very large percentage of the total revenue is the property tax. So if you're collecting $250 million approximately, that means that 1% of that collection is $2.5 million. That's how you get to a $2.5 million variance up or down is 1% on the tax rate. So when you, and with an $18 roughly, $18.30, whatever tax rate, 1% of that is 18 cents. So $4 million to 2.5 is about 4 million to 2.5, 1% on the tax rate is about 1.6 percent. 1.6 times 250 million is 4 million. 1.6 times 2.5 million is 4 million. So if you then think of an 18-cent tax rate, 1.6 is, about 32 cents or something like that. So you add that to, 1830 and you get up around 1860. Very rough, kind of approximate estimates. But that's the basic, concepts that you're applying.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Good.
you.
Alderman Kelly, all set?
I'm all set.
Okay. Alderman Karen,
I'm fine.
all set? Alderman Wilshire? Okay. The chair will indulge, if I may, at this particular second. I don't want to cross any lines of political engineering. Let me use the disclaimer, I am running for office again in the state position. But fully by state law, you do, incumbents do have the right to write a bill for the upcoming legislation, to which, working with Representative Mike Edgar, we did it again, because we felt that the gentleman from Wolfboro basically cut the $2 million to a one-time thing. The original bill was supposed to be annually to receive that. Now, we don't know what the strategy is in the future. It could come down, maybe the city won't get a check at all. Perhaps maybe it might go right to the UALL, which is the unfunded liability. But would that not benefit the city equally as well by cutting that down? So wish us luck as we get into those endeavors in the future. But I hope to get back to the State House so I could pick up the sword and go slay the dragon on this one. So, we shall see. But the other thing I would just like to say, I'd like to remind you all, regardless on your pending vote for this evening, I am proud to vote for this because it does take $4 million and put it back into the taxpayers. That definitely needed. You got to look what happened. We did have a tax rate problems, and now that's coming up. And I think people coming right off of COVID could most certainly use a break. And I would like to remind everybody, all the aldermen, that at the next September 27th, I think it is, meeting of the Board of Aldermen, we're going to need 10 votes in support of this. So that's all my comment is. So hopefully we could do that. And without any other further questions, did you have a question, Alderman Karen?
No, I'm fine. Thank
I would say that getting this money that Alderman State Representative O'Brien got, it was like a miracle. I mean, we had been fighting this every session, nothing. And then in the House, didn't it lose once, but you brought it back for reconsideration?
It was in the
votes
can.
are a few votes either way.
Let me put it, it wasn't in the can, it was in the dumpster. I went out and got it and brought it back.
So reconsideration, and then there's a tabling motion, which gets reversed, and, it just goes on and on and on. Finally, the House did pass it. And after, 2 or 3 different floor fights, I think. And so the Senate, I think, didn't want to commit to permanent, so to kind of pacify things, they passed this one-year bill. And then the House went along with that.
Mr. Mayor was never more grateful than to kiss the Blarney Stone, so it happened to work. And the fact that it almost worked would have been such a great asset to the city. Absolutely, absolutely. Comment? Yes, Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm gonna vote for this. I'm happy to reduce the tax rate. I'm disappointed to find out that $4 million only equates to 60 cents reduction on the tax rate, but it's better. Better than nothing.
More like 30 cents. 1.6% roughly of the tax rate, which at an 18% rate equates to, 30 cents or maybe a little more.
Okay, well,
So,
I'm more disappointed.
Alderman Sullivan.
I'm gonna support this as well. But what would happen if we were to kick in another 2.5 million? It's there. What would that mean?
it would reduce things by another 30 cents, but it would also mean that the fund balance didn't grow, and, there could be questions asked later on about what we were up to.
Follow up?
Follow up?
Thank you. If it were to drop us down to a AA credit rating, how would that impact our borrowing status? What would that put us up to as far as interest on those bonds?
We don't know. But I think a sign of strength for the city has been that we have the rare situation, which is rare, that we have 2 AAA bond ratings. Now, there might be Concord might have it, Concord might have that as a state capital, but not many communities have double AAA at all, and not many communities have 2 AAA ratings.
Mm-hmm.
So it would certainly, in terms of our, our sort of image as a community that is able to manage their finances carefully and prudently, it would certainly be a step backward.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I could add, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Griffin.
We're in the market every year. Bonds are highly sought after. When I work with the Hilltop Security experts, they're our financial advisor. The refrain I get is, you've got AAA ratings, well-managed, highly sought after. So we had hustled, got in kind of before things started really taking off at the increase in interest rates, but we got a 3.55 on the general fund, non-taxable. We're compared favorably with Nantucket, they're a AAA, but we're in the bucket of AAA folks. It's hard to tell how much we lose, but once you meet that goal, that lofty height from a financial perspective, it does. We're in a group of highly sought after bonds to sell to the investor communities that are looking for security, looking for a good investment. And we've worked hard to get there. Just before I got here, my predecessors were able to convince Fitch to be a AAA, and then we worked with Standard & Poor's. Some of the analytics were very distressing, such that, like Bedford, New Hampshire, they were a AAA. How do we get to Bedford? Well, you got to lose 20,000 inhabitants, and you have to raise the property value. You know what I mean? It's just nonsensical. So Treasurer Fredette and I and the mayor were very happy with the AAA. And as I mentioned, 2 years ago, during the pandemic, Treasurer Fredette and I got called by Moody's, who actually increased us slightly, or increased us one more notch up, one below the AAA from a Moody's perspective. So they went out of their way to actually call us. So we're in that group of highly sought after investments in the sales of our bonds, and that translates into lower bonding costs over time. Thank you.
We're good? Okay, seeing no other further comments, I will call for the vote. We could do this on a vote, a voice vote, yes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and R-22-062 goes before the full board with the recommendation of final passage. Also, this evening, we have tabled in committee 0-22-019. Seeing no request or motion, it shall remain on the table. General discussion.
On that last ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is at least the third time that this has come before the committee. Is it appropriate to indefinitely postpone this legislation?
No, yeah, Alderman Wilshire?
No, they might be waiting for something that they haven't figured yet. I mean, it was only tabled 2 months ago. It's not unusual for things to be tabled for a longer time so that I don't know what their plan is. I haven't been to their meetings, but I would not do that at this meeting. I mean, they
Okay.
might have something that we don't know is going on. I mean, if you ask the main sponsor,
Yeah,
that might be okay, but.
okay, I'll do that. It just seems like it's on a rotation.
No, duly understood, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but I have to agree with Alderman Wilshire, give them a chance to
Okay.
work on it. Okay, with that done, general discussion, Alderman Kelly.
I was gonna ask this while we were chatting a bit more, but I'm just interested at some point, and maybe it would make sense to have it at this meeting, but I wanna know more about the pension backstory and, how it's come to be, and, I mean,
Oh.
the mayor said something about they were legally liable, but just, decided not to pay it? Like, I'm very interested to know
Yeah.
why we are where we
Well,
are.
Do you want it now, or do you want it off camera? But I could give a brief synopsis right
Give me
now.
Brief?
Yeah,
The
Do
public
you need a
brief-
whiteboard?
kids go get the popcorn, here we go. But basically, in 1967, prior to that, I'm talking 1966, there were 4, pension systems run by the state. There was police, fire, there was the teachers, and what they say, others, but the others were people who worked for like DOT, that may have worked in the offices and stuff like that. And the concept at the time was to combine them all, and which was kind of in a way brilliant, because you get a better, more money invested, it gave better opportunities, a way to grow the pension system. Many communities did not have or were not into the state pension system. They ran their own. So to entice municipalities to join the state pension system, the state came up with a law that basically said that that the state would pay 35%. The state also came up on the back door, the backside of that too, that no contributing, once you join into the pension system, you can't pick up your basket and walk out the door. You are liable for all unfunded liabilities, all obligations, and everything else. So once you were in, you were in. But the state promised that they would pay 35%. And that worked for an awful long time, and unfortunately, this is what happens when pension systems become the political football of one political group over another political group, and that's exactly what happened. There was times when the state, we were in bad economic times, they did take some money out. That was not the first time. The original Governor Sununu did that equally as well, but the members of the pension system sued and he put the money back in after he funded the budget. But it happened again. And so, there's other things too. Over the life of the system, where did the UALL come from? That was, many municipalities got a holiday. The pension system, the numbers they were using may or may not have been accurate, but at 100%, and cities and towns says, well, if it's 100%, do we have to pay? And they received a holiday. Then they found out with new numbers that we were down to almost like 60%. So that's where the unfunded liability came in. And correct me if I get some of this wrong, but it's just a brief overview. So all these 2 loggerheads coming in, and then I say again, one political party came in and then it was supposed to be a state law in 2012 to bring it back up to 35%. That was vacated, and from that point, it dropped from 35 to 30, 25, and then down to 0. So this left cities and towns the 35% holding the bag. So now you got the unfunded liability, and then you also got the 35% that's required to be paid. You can't get it 100% out of the employees. They're already meeting their contractual obligations. As a matter of fact, the employees themselves have suffered increases equally as well. So thus is the fix. So I wrote my bill just briefly and looking at it to go to 1/3 in a way to, a 7.5%, at least get us partially there back to the 35% that was originally. And again, it got shot down to 1 year and 1 year only. But my original bill was that was going to be annually, and that the money would come from the state surplus that they have as well. So it would be a fine way for the state to apply it back. Alderman Wilshire.
Why did the state decide that the pension system needed to be funded at 100%? Not everybody's going to retire at the same time, right? Why did it need to be
Well,
funded at 100%?
you're absolutely correct, and I agree with you. They came up with the UALL,
What is the UALL? You
the unfunded accrual liabilities.
Yes, the
John,
unfunded actuarial
Yeah,
liability. But the reason for the 100% is, it's kind of like what, kind of like their thoughts and their preachings of 100%. Now, I look at it, if you try to get 100%, you're probably going to get 80 or 90, because things are going to change. If you try to get 80, you're probably going to get 70. So my mother always said, John, strive for the A's, don't settle for B's, right? So that's kind of that. But it's a really complicated thing, and I would say that if I can get a handle on, get my hands on a great piece of writing that Barbara Reed, who was the financial advisor to on the NHMA staff, she retired a few years ago, but she did a great writing of what Alderman O'Brien was talking about. It's really complicated, and if you think you're gonna get assumed rate of return of 7%, in 1 year you get 15, you can't take the money out. And that's what they did. They provided what they call supplemental benefits, probably back for like a 20-year period, and that really drained the system. And what's happening because of low interest rate environment, they keep reducing the assumed rate of return down, and that's billions. That's not millions. So, but great work, great writings. And as Alderman O'Brien said, if you look back, I will send out a history of the rates, because when you started, the cities paid less to the employees, especially fire and police. So there was, and then I think some things were going on, and then around 2008, you needed pension reform in a big way, and you needed it not only in New Hampshire, but everywhere. And the fact of the matter is, a 50% funding rate, 60% is just not good. In Massachusetts, where things get a little bit expensive, I'm from Mass, they were issuing bonds for OPEB liabilities, because a lot of the folks down that work for Massachusetts cities and towns, they get subsidies on medical costs, dental costs. We don't have that. At least our OPEB liability is more of what they call an implicit, not an explicit. The only retirement program for medical, other than the NHRS, is the teachers, but they have to be here for a while. That's that small. If you look at the ACFA now, it used to be the CAFRA, now it's the ACFA, you'll see a little bit of an explicit liability. But but they have actuaries, they reformed it. I looked, and with no disrespect to union folks, it was like the Noah's Ark of pension management. They had 2 policemen, 2 firemen, 2 teachers, 2 civilians. Not really weighted in the right direction. Now they actually have very effective board members. And they look at it every 10 years. So the decennial commission, 2008, 2008, 2018, and they decided to just stay the course, reduce the rate of return. That's the big hit. So the things that we argued was rate of return, you reduced it. Trying to get to 100%. And then the other one is 100 years after The Wizard of Oz was produced, 2038, they want to get to 100%. So the clock's ticking. We're only 16 or 17 years from 2038, 16 years. And that liability is just growing leaps and bounds. And if you look at if you review when we came in before the Finance Committee and had Mr. Ed Boyd review that section, the numbers are staggering. It almost eliminates the value of the city. $300 million worth of pension liability on the city. But the good news is the rating agencies understand that. That's why there's a little section that says we're worried about pension, but they understand that it's just mathematics and arithmetic. As long as we can fund, as the mayor said, the 34 million, that's gonna grow to 36 million. As long as we can fund that, we're in good shape, because that's the budget look. But the liability is just enormous, and I went up there and testified, the mayor, Alderman O'Brien, just not getting any progress, because we're accused of being, just giving money away, right, Alderman O'Brien, and that's not the case. So you have that, north of Concord and south of Concord, and it's a challenge, but we've been able to afford it. But as Alderman Sullivan said, they should take a look at the 900,000 and see if we could use it effectively to reduce the burden. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just like to say too, there's a hidden problem of COLAs. And to people that don't know, it's the cost of living increases. The difference with a defined benefit program in the state, you are at the whim of this legislature to receive a COLA. It is sad that when I see there a firefighter, a police officer, teacher, they're committed their, working years to their municipality and retired after 20, 30 years and was blessed with longevity, but they're living in despair because the pension system they never received the COLAs. We did try to get the COLAs every 5 years, and that was defeated last year. Because in our opinion, in the math we were using, the COLAs, every 5 years, you lose a certain percentages with the inflation and try to keep it up. And it would be nice if it was on a scheduled basis. I mean, there might be some time where everybody's hitting that great economic problem. You could change it to adapt to that. But still to this day, there's no guarantees. Like I say, I've been retired 6, 7 years and never received a COLA. And yet it's very sad. There was one guy called Timer from Manchester, living practically destitute, and because the COLAs never catched up with him. But Alderman Kelly, I would just like to say, with the usual caveats, my explanation on the pension system is basically, legit, but at an overview. It's, I think you get the impression, it's a complex problem. It took a lot to get us that tire stuck in the mud, and it is stuck in the mud. Pension system should be basically left alone. One of the greatest problems, in my opinion only, to the state of New Hampshire retirement system is 399 other legislators. You should have backed off years ago and let the money grow. And when you keep changing things on a whim, it's part of the problem here too. So I hope that helped you,
Yes, thank you.
with the usual caveats, you know. Anybody else? Okay, I did that very quickly. So.
You did.
Yes,
Okay.
Alderman Carroll.
Yeah, ask a question. The state wants the pension to be 100%. There isn't, I don't think there's a pension around that has 100%. What is BPW's pension? Because that's the other pension that's within the city for Board of Public Works employees. But I know they've struggled for a long time, and they've been moving up. They haven't been getting COLAs or anything either. But where are they at this point in time? I haven't,
Yeah,
are they at
Mr. Ch-
75%?
They've had some very good growth. At the height of the market, they were over 100%.
Oh,
But most recently,
okay.
with the interest rates and inflation and everything else, they're probably low 90s. But they've done very well. And Mr. Fredette, who is very active, and others, they've actually given what they refer to as one-time stipends or things of
Yeah.
that nature. So Mr. Fredette and the others recognize that the lack of a COLA does hurt the retirees on the pension system. So the BPW pension, so they've fortunately given those twice in the last 10 years, which has been good. Most recently, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah. Alderman Carroll, I'm also on the board. I agree with CFO Griffin. I think it's anybody who works for BPW, it's a very well-run system. I am very proud of it. I wish the state was run like that, you know, but unfortunately not. But like I say, we cannot afford, in that case, to get them COLA. So we did get the 13th, I hate to use the term, the 13th check, but usually around Christmas time, Santa that is at the board meetings wrote the check, and, you know, and it was a little bit of something. And we did that because we really want to say thank you to the people who dedicated their lives to the city. They're not forgotten, you know, and so I hope you did get that. Did you get that?
I didn't get it, but somebody else did. And I've been retired from the city
Well, we'll talk later on
16
that.
years, and I know
Yeah.
that what the state has not provided. So it's a tough situation because when I started working here, we had no pension. And that's when the state came down and started, you know, asking, trying to get the big cities to join the
Right.
pension. And that big pull was the 35% that the state was going to contribute every year. And that's what brought them in, because they didn't bring it in until 1974, because I was here 10 years before pensions were, you know, provided, other than BPW. So they made a promise, you know, to these big towns, basically, Manchester, Concord, Nassau.
Everybody in the system,
And then,
yeah.
you know, in the North Country, they don't have as many people working for their municipalities, or the police department, fire, whatever. So it was a great enticement, but then they turned around, whether it's political, whatever, and yes, did take from the pension. I was up there when we fought for some of that, for some of those changes, and it just didn't happen. So it really takes a chunk out of our budget, especially with the additional monies that we have to put in. But we also have to make people understand every employee puts a percentage of their salary into that pension as well. It's not a freebie. It's not, you know, the city paying for your pension. You, as an employee, have to contribute to that pension program. Otherwise, you know, what is the point? I always said you've got to share, you know. If you want something later on, you've got to also contribute to the pot. So, but yeah, it's a long discussion, and you know, I remember when the pension people came down with the changes and trying to talk and how you, Alderman O'Brien, was trying to figure out how do we get the state to go back and make that commitment happen again, because they do have a lot of surplus, and they certainly could make, you know, some money to help out the cities and towns within the state, you know, to continue. Thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to talk.
Just a complete overview. A promise made should be a promise kept.
Yes,
That's what all good gentlemen and all good ladies do.
that's right.
Unfortunately,
Doesn't always happen.
yes, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. I appreciate all the Q&A tonight around the fund balance. And the reason for my questions and the reason for the hypotheticals around wanting to push more if we could, it seemed to me that we could. I know it might hurt our overall bond rating, but I think it might help the citizens of Nashua, where everything has gone up this year, and that was out of their control. Gas prices, energy prices, now mortgages have ticked up. And I thought this was an opportunity for us to do that. I'm grateful that we are moving in some dollars. I thought that maybe as citizens of Nashua are hurting a little bit, maybe we turn it a little bit more to see if we can help them, understanding what's going on at the state level, things that we can't control. But there are things that we can't control here, and that's why I push that. And that's why I'm asking the questions around the trust funds, where those monies sit, because everything that we do, and I just did the quick math, and maybe it would only affect it by $100, but $100 is $100. It might be 2 tanks of gas. It might be natural gas, which I know is going to be more expensive this year. That's why I asked those questions, and that's why I wanted to press a little bit harder on that. So thanks.
Alderman Kelly.
I appreciate, you know, the comment around people are just feeling inflation, et cetera. What I was surmising, and I'm sure you can confirm, is that keeping the AAA bond rating is actually going to, over time, save people a lot more than a one-time hit, because our rates will be better, et cetera.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
overly
it's hard.
simplify
Yeah,
it.
it's a simplification, but it is true. And it is hard to become a AAA, but when you're at a AAA, it's important. But the questions are all germane to the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Any other further comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, public comment. Ms. Ortolano, welcome. You know the drill.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I want to thank the board and Mr. Griffin and the mayor for explaining a little more about what that $1 million means per tax rate, the 4/10. That's great. I had a pretty good understanding of it. I want to make you aware of something, though, and I think it's really important. When we dropped the tax rate in 2018 and KRT came in, we saw properties grow about 23%. And our tax rate came down about 20%, which means the average growth on a home saw, essentially, if you fell into that average, no increase in your tax rate. However, now this year, the average home has grown 40% or just over. The tax rate is coming down 21. So we're asking property owners to eat the other 20%. So a ranch, when KRT came in 2013, it was about 225. In 2018, it was 265. This year in 2022, it's 380. So a ranch last year had a tax bill, if you did the 23-22 at the start of the tax bill, $61.50 was the tax bill. This year, when they come up with the 1830, it's going to be $7,000. It's going up $850. That is significant. I don't think you realize that the number of people that fall at a 20% or lower increase on their property is a small number, and that the vast majority of property owners are going to see an increase, and the vast majority are going to see a big one, like the condos, the mobile homes, the small capes and ranches. Mobile homes, some of them tripled. So a mobile home bill that was a $50,000 mobile home last year was 1,044, or this year right now is 1,044. It's going to get recalculated to 2,760. That's enormous. So I appreciate you looking for the other million, or 2.5 million. But we know that that was worth about
1 minute.
18 cents. It's not, the tax rate to cover the 40% increase that we saw in properties would have to go down to about $13.95. We're at $18.30. We're not even close. So we're asking citizens to soak up an awful lot when gas, when heat, when food, and all this went up. I think it's going to be brutal. So I think you have to be careful at your board table on what you're voting for. That's why I'm very careful about this bonding on new projects and the spending. I've been very, very concerned about that, because now that I see these numbers, this is a lot of money. Thank you.
All righty. Seeing no one else for public comment in the room, remarks by Alderman. We'll start over here. Alderman Sullivan.
All set.
All set, thank you. Alderman Jettie? All set. Alderman Kelly? All set, thank you. Alderman Karen? All set. Alderman Wilshire?
I'm good.
Oh, no, you got one more motion to make
Make
then.
a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting is adjourned at 8:06. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.